Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Lewiston Planning Board meeting of April 10th. I am the chairperson, and I would ask Christine Kittredge to call the roll, please.
Roger Dupre.
Here.
Joshua Najin.
Here.
Michael Marcotte.
Present.
Shanna Cox.
Here.
Lucy Bisson.
Here.
Myself, Christine Kittredge, present. Amy Smith.
Here.
Lee Albert.
Here.
And Alex Pine.
Here.
And for the record, Shelley Norton, Deputy Director, City Planner, and Linda Tripp, Administrative Assistant, is here for the city. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
The only adjustment from staff is that the minutes from March 27 aren't available quite yet, so we'll have those at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Correspondence, it says Maine Municipal Association Planning Board Training at the Green Ladle on June 7th, 4:30 to 8:30. And to members of the board, if you're interested, please let Linda know by 4/21 if you want to be registered.
And we did have one question. I know that 4:30 is an early start for folks, for those of us who work. So if people do want to come late, I mean, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. That's, I think, up to you. It's 4 hours. They talk pretty much nonstop. I mean, even with the dinner break, I believe it's dinner service at the tables. So 4 hours is a lot of information to absorb. You would probably still get something out of 2 or 3 hours of it, is my guess, based on past attendance that I've had of that. So just let people know.
Okay, so anyone interested, please let Linda know.
Linda, I'm interested, and it's in my calendar.
Okay. All right, okay. All right, in that case, we're going to go to public hearings. A 42 Strawberry Avenue LLC has submitted a development review application to construct a 12,000 square foot climate-controlled building with paved access at the existing self-storage facility on 3.4 acres at 42 Strawberry Avenue. And Ms. Norton.
Okay. So back in May of 2022, most of you were on the board, so you'll be familiar with this site. This was an undeveloped site. There was a little bit of gravel, asphalt pavement on site. They have put 4 self-storage buildings on it that you approved last year, done most of the site improvements. There's the security fencing, there's the pavements around those buildings, and the stormwater. The applicant is coming back to amend that site plan to add a new climate-controlled building that's 12,000 square feet in the back of the site, on an area that they hadn't developed yet. So they will be extending their electrical service to that new building so that the exterior lights and then the heating and cooling of the building will be powered. The exterior lights will be mounted on the building 10 feet from the ground, and they will be full cutoff. There is no office included with any of the part of this project, what's there or what's proposed, so there's no need for potable water or sewage disposal. However, the building is required to have a sprinkler system, and so the applicant is proposing a water storage system on site instead of running a water line. The comment on that from the fire department is essentially that they will have to meet the National Fire Protection Act standards. So we just have a condition of, sorry, yeah, thank you, a condition suggested for that they would, that their design would be approved under that code. Okay, so the additional impervious area should be handled by the existing stormwater. We did have, due to vacation schedule and also plans that the applicant had submitted electronically but not on paper, so we didn't finish the stormwater review prior to John going on vacation, so we just have a condition of approval about that, but since they already have the new pond on site, it will either be sufficient for that, or if they have to enlarge it, that will be fine. So we don't anticipate that being an issue either. There are just 7 estimated trips for traffic. They are providing 4 additional on-site parking spaces. They're not required to provide those, so there's really no issue with traffic or parking that's proposed. Really the biggest issue, and it's pretty minor in nature, has to do with the board determining if the buffers provided are sufficient. So you may recall that there are a couple of houses on Libby Avenue, or Libby Street rather, 19 and 21. And they, with their prior site plan, the board had required 9 spruce trees be planted for that buffer. At this time, those haven't been planted. It was mostly due to the timing of when things were constructed last year. So the intent is to install those this spring. They have a temporary certificate of occupancy, but not the permanent one yet. So they will have to do that in order to get their permanent certificate of occupancy for the phase that's already in the ground. As you know, we've been working on updating the buffer standard, me and you, over the last few months. So I did pass out this evening what you approved on March 13th at our meeting. I'm sorry I didn't have that updated in time to go in your packets on Friday. So I guess the real question, and when JP, who's here on behalf of the applicant, presents, he can go over that and point specifically on the plan to you. The buffer that's proposed doesn't extend the full length of the new building. So the thought is maybe to extend that buffer, but there are some existing deciduous trees. They're of a height that they probably won't screen the building. So I think the board will want to consider whether fencing would be appropriate or what other things. Probably cutting the trees to put other trees in its place doesn't make sense. So we can look at that. The applicant is open to that discussion. And because it is a commercial use going in next to a residential use, a buffer is required. So as far as moving on to staff comments. So conditions of approval that we're proposing, the first one has to do with making sure that stormwater has been addressed to public works satisfaction. The second one, that the fire suppression method that they've used, that they demonstrate that they will meet those NFPA requirements, that there would be a resubmittal before signature of whatever buffer provisions are agreed upon this evening. And then there was also one comment too that I had. They had 2 street trees proposed on their last site plan. One is required. They there's 2 trees on site. So I think there's maybe a difference in timing as to when JP went out on site and when I did. It looks like someone installed 2 trees. They are far smaller than what the street tree standard is, which is an 8-foot high tree that's 2.5-inch caliper. They're shorter than me. So the thought also for condition number 4 would be to require 1 street tree that meets the 8-foot and 2.5-inch caliper requirement. So those are the recommended comments from staff, in addition to a 5th one, which is our standard requirement that their engineer certify that everything's complete on site prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Ms. Cox?
Shelley, my question's on staff recommendation number 4. So there's 1 tree that's not 8 feet tall, and that's great because only 1 tree is required, so 1 tree has to be installed that's 8 feet and 2.5 inches, right?
Yeah, so they've installed 2 that are too small, and
Yeah.
so the suggestion is that they would install 1 that's the right size.
Would
That's
it-
the fit.
Certainly half of this question is yours, and certainly half is yet to come. But the real importance here is that a minimum of 1 street tree. So
That's
if
right.
they love some good symmetry and they want to put 2 in, they could.
Yes.
So our language is really about at least 1.
Yep. Yeah, that's the requirement based on how much road frontage they have and the
It's not like they're
spacing that's
limited
required.
to 1 8-foot
Nope,
tree.
definitely
Go ahead
not
and put a
limited.
couple in. Okay. Just checking.
Okay. Roger?
Shelley, on the map, S1, it shows the two houses on Libby Avenue. To the right of the last house, is there buildable lots there?
That's a good question. So what I can say is if you want to look at the map, or actually what
There, he's
JP
got it
showed,
right there.
There's, so this one's a single family, this one's a single family, this one is a single family, and this is like a shop that used to be used by this house. We're not sure exactly how it's being used right now, but we have these coded as a single family and a single family. So this is just, I believe David said, like the person's location of the shop being able. I don't know how that building is currently used, but it's part of that lot. So it's still considered part of this residential.
So beyond that, is that buildable?
Back here,
Yes.
let us,
Yeah, can we look at the tax? I'm having a hard time visualizing roads.
There's,
Yeah, because this is on the other side of the
Tell us.
railroad tracks.
yeah, on the other, there's, directly across the railroad tracks, there's a kind of like a handmade loading dock on this like, cream colored
Yeah.
building. And then the building that's in the
Yeah.
far back has a bunch of like, RVs parked in it. So, I think it might be buildable, but I think it's one wall.
The tax parcels relative to the streets and this property.
It makes it more,
it's not cool.
yeah, it makes it easier to visualize. I'm a visual. type
And
of
Shelley's
person.
getting darn good at navigating the tax
Yes,
maps.
she is.
While people stare.
When it works, right? Like, what's going on here?
We can just probably zoom in on it.
We
right?
could probably just zoom in on
Yeah,
it.
just zoom in, it's, yeah, we can find it.
Oh, I put it in the wrong space, thank you.
Because we put you on the spot.
It's user error, not the computer.
Ah, okay.
Oh, user error too many times, here we go. We'll get this eventually.
There
Hey,
My husband's always
okay,
saying that when I complain
So-
about the computer, it's me, but.
okay, so where's the railroad, so the railroad track is this,
Correct.
okay.
So we're looking at these houses here. So
Yeah,
this is a
down there,
commercial,
over there.
and these are both residential properties. So it doesn't look like this would be developable.
Because it's all that property.
What's
Yeah.
the zoning? Probably,
It's UE, Urban Enterprise.
right, I was
where-
I was thinking
I
that.
don't know if the whole, oh, it looks like the houses are in that zone as well. So unless somebody was to extend Libby Avenue, you probably couldn't build back here. I don't know how serious that stream is either, if that's real or
It's pretty serious.
Substantial.
not. Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's the drainage swale from Strawberry Ave. We're dumping our stormwater basin into it. There's a fairly substantial driveway culvert
So
existing.
it's possible somebody could do like a frontage right of way and get maybe an additional lot or two back here that's shared off of it, but if that's a limiting factor, then it's probably limited what the opportunities are.
I wouldn't put onus on the applicant for a potential future subdivision extension and right of way though, in terms of buffering,
Right,
right, would be existing.
Yeah. Yeah, my thought was that they would continue the buffer for the extent of building that they're installing, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like the rest of the building.
An
not the
existing
whole property
residential.
line.
Mm-hmm,
Right.
yeah, not the entire property line.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, should that happen, we can adjust that to add buffering?
No, so if somebody were to build houses in the future, we wouldn't have the opportunity to go back to the self-storage facility and ask them to do anything. The people putting in the housing could decide to do that, or individual residents buying the houses or building, buying the lots could. But this is really the opportunity that we have to require buffering of this applicant.
Can you build a single-family homes in urban enterprise?
No, not at this time, I believe. it's
Okay,
just
so
one
that's
family.
not gonna be an issue.
No.
Unless the zoning is changed, urban enterprise, it would be a business, something like that.
Yeah.
But not, and a business against a business isn't a big deal. So, yes, sir.
I'm not certain, but.
Can you identify yourself for
Sure, my
the
name is
record?
J.P. Conley, I work for DM Roma. I believe the UE allows for multifamily or apartments.
Yes. Yeah, so multifamily, which is 3 or more, but not single or
Oh, okay.
two-family.
So it could be residential, but it would have to be multifamily. Okay. Anybody else have any issues or questions? Amy?
Yeah, just one question. There's a huge elevation change, right, between where the current ones are, and is the new one going to be going in at the higher elevation, or are you going to dig out? I'm just wondering how it's going to be
Sure.
level-wise.
They offered us some good info on that with heights from rooftops,
Yeah, there is.
because I was wondering the same thing. Bottom of page 2, this paragraph, if it's useful. Because the elevation change, it appears to staff that the proposed 16-foot-high building approximately 6 to 7 will stick up above the slope, while 9 to 10 feet of the building will be below the slope. Thus, vegetation or fencing at 6 feet tall should cover it.
Right, but the actual elevation is level with the existing buildings?
Virtually, it's gonna be a little bit higher. This portion of the driveway aisle is gonna be about, it's gonna be vary between 4 to 8%. These elevations, the building elevation is 204. So we will be actually excavating down, 210 contours here, and over here we're 208, 209. So there's gonna be 4 feet of cut into that hill, and the resultant slope behind it. Now, with regards to the building design, we know that the vertical clearance inside the building is 12 feet. They've proposed a fairly flat pitched roof, which is still in development. So basically the roof line should be somewhere under 13 feet at the peak from the finished floor to the top. 16 is what I'm more comfortable saying, just because if the pitch of the roof changes, it's a 60-foot long width, 30 feet to the peak. That could have some significant, impact on the building height. But we know it's not going to exceed 16 feet, so that's where I got that number from.
Okay.
Okay, but with all that excavation, you don't need a retaining wall or anything?
No, they're pretty standard cut slopes, 3-to-1 cut slope. And I'm not even, my slope is starting essentially at the setback line, which I believe, I want to say is 25 offhand.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Anyone else? Alex?
Yeah, so looking at the plan, you're just planning on putting a little lighting around the front where the entrance is? No lighting on the back, no like security floodlight or anything like
Correct.
that? Okay, so that won't disturb the neighbors. And then, nothing to do with our approval here, but I noticed you have some good south-facing elevation. Has the owner considered solar on this building?
I believe it's been considered. I don't know to what extent that is at. I know that they're changed gears in terms of, doing some improvements to the building to getting, the sprinkler system designed. That's our big focus right now.
Gotcha, okay. Well, I'd encourage the owners to consider it.
All right. Roger?
The cistern for the sprinkler system, where is that going to be located?
Well, the development of the sprinkler system has not been completed. And as Shelley mentioned, there is an access, or there's opportunities for us to bring public water to the site. I believe the main ends at Strawberry Ave, where it tees into Strawberry Ave. So it'd be a fairly decent extension. So that's one consideration. The second consideration is a potable or private non-potable well on site to provide supply. And then-
Artesian well?
What's that?
An artesian well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the opportunity would either for a cistern with water delivered, then that tank could be either interior of the building or exterior. And then quite frankly, we would be pushing for interior. there's a lot less mechanical problems, freezing, thawing. The tanks are inside, they're visible. They can tell if there's a supply of water there that's necessary. But at the same time too, we haven't vetted that whole design yet. The building manufacturer hasn't made a recommendation to the applicant yet. So those are the three possibilities we're considering. Quite frankly, we're going to default to whatever the fire department prefers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Mike, I'm sorry.
Kind of follow up, because what caught my attention too was the trees. And I didn't remember the conversation from the previous approval. So, one was required, but two were offered up at the time.
Street trees, yes, yep.
And where about are these trees?
Oh, they're right here. It shows it on the plan. They're right here, near the gate.
Because there was a photograph somewhere, and I was getting confused on what part of Strawberry, like the part that went down to the T in the road, or, that's at the gate, right?
Yeah, that was the proposed location for the two street trees.
On either side of the gate?
No, on one side.
Basically, the gate's here, so they'd be both to the right side.
To the right side.
So there's not
And
much confusion.
And the whole purpose of having the trees as a requirement is what?
Yeah, so the intent for street trees would be that there would be a kind of a consistent vegetated look along the street that would be consistent with just providing that city green space. So the applicant installs it, and potentially if it's in the right of way, then the city arborist would take care of it, or if it needs to be on their property, then they would. So it's really just a beautification and to provide consistency so that, you know, if we require it on all the streets, then over time, the streets will be tree lined as there's development, things are built
And
up.
only one was required? Is that because of the,
It's because of the very short distance of
Short
Strawberry
distance.
Ave that they have, so I think our spacing is every 25 to 50 feet, you need one tree, and I think they only had about 50 feet, so one is what's required.
because what caught my attention was, I know that it didn't meet the requirement, but I'm not inclined to push to require the third one at this point. That's it.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? At this point, I'll open it up to the public, and does anyone wish to speak for or against this project? Seeing none, I will close it and bring it back to the board, and I will entertain a motion.
Yeah,
Anyone, or any further discussion?
would love to talk about the buffer,
Okay.
so that we can include it thoughtfully in our
Absolutely.
motion.
Okay.
If I were to just provide a motion, I would do so with all the language provided, and then just note that the revised site plan be submitted that shows buffer provisions for the entire length of the building that meet the requirements of Appendix A, yada, yada, yada. Is there any reason that we need for him to choose tonight, or us to decide and put it in terms of like process, that it is any of the items that are approved within the design standards? Is it, I'm just trying to think of where we are in updating the standards themselves. Is there any reason the applicant wouldn't have the ability within our design standards to choose?
Yeah, if
Do we
the
need a
board-
fence or deciduous tree or berm tonight, or can that just be agreed upon that staff is looking for that as they finalize plans?
That's fine, yep. So now that we've updated the standards based on your amendment to them on March 13th, the applicant has that. The applicant could choose one of these options and resubmit in discussion with staff, and we could move that forward, if that would be the preferred way for the board to go forward with this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a business decision to some extent. And I think our job is to make sure that there's appropriate buffering for the residential properties abutting.
Okay.
I didn't know how everyone else on the board felt about that before I just
Yeah,
threw down a motion.
I think that's a better solution, to let the applicant and city staff work together and decide which is best for that particular location. You know, we haven't been out there, we don't know well, I have been, but we don't know exactly what what'll look best or what'll give the neighbors the best protection. So I think we just leave it to staff.
And what's cost effective for the project?
Correct, that too.
Reaching the finish line.
Absolutely.
Then I'd love to make a motion.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that the application submitted by 42 Strawberry Avenue LLC to construct a new 12,000 square foot climate-controlled storage building at 42 Strawberry Avenue meets all of the necessary criteria contained in the zoning and land use code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4 approval criteria, and that approval be granted with the following conditions. That prior to the issuance of a building permit, the stormwater comments be addressed to Public Works satisfaction. That prior to issuance of a building permit, the fire suppression method chosen will have been demonstrated to meet the required National Fire Protection Act standards. That a revised site plan be submitted that shows buffer provisions for the entire length of the building and abutting residential structures. That's an edit. Did you get that one? Because it's not just his building. That meet the requirements of Appendix A, Article 13, and design Lewiston site plan review and design guidelines standards. And that a revised site plan be submitted that shows a minimum of one street tree, meeting the minimum 8-foot high and 2.5-inch caliper size at installation has been added to the site plan. And that a note be added to the site plan. We have all this printed for you, don't worry. Prior to any certificate of occupancy being issued, the applicant's designing engineer shall submit a final inspection report to the city indicating all site improvements, including stormwater system, have been completed in accordance with the approved plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roger, okay. Any further discussion? Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
Yes.
Shanna Cox,
Yes?
Christine Kittredge,
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. And here's all the conditions. You can have, yeah,
Yeah.
please. Oh, absolutely, there's no reason for you to rewrite all that.
That is what it
Okay,
looked like.
well, good luck, and hopefully all your issues are resolved soon.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to commend the planning staff. They were excellent to work for and with, and I look forward to completing this project with you guys.
Fantastic, that's great.
Snag that
Great to
testimonial
hear.
and put it out there for all developers to
Yeah,
hear about development in
absolutely.
Lewiston.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Okay, in other business, Choice Wedgewood LP, on behalf of Lewiston Auburn Area Housing Development Corporation, has submitted a de minimis amendment to the Wedgewood Choice Neighborhood Subdivision at 101 Pine Street. Ms. Norton?
Okay, so in September, I believe, I didn't put it here, but I believe it was September 26th of 2022, the board approved the subdivision and development review for the Wedgewood Choice Neighborhood project in the downtown at 101 Pine Street. Since that time, there have been some minor tweaky changes that have happened. There was a private restriction or deed restriction that the applicant thought they had addressed in their contract zone, and it ended up being that there needed to be some tweaks to where the buildings were placed to make sure they were out of that area. So there's just been some fine tuning as far as building placement. Also because of that, they've reoriented and changed some of the porches to get those out of that area. And then there have been some other minor changes to fencing, lighting, things like that. So there have been changes this fall and winter that the applicant's been doing in discussion with staff. Typically, a de minimis change like that would actually happen at the staff level, but since this was subdivision, it is required under our ordinance that we bring that to the board for you to make a finding that it is de minimis in nature and wouldn't require you to have further review with a public hearing. So that's kind of why we're here, is for that determination. We also had the applicant include new elevations so you can see kind of that change to the porches. This did require review under the Design Lewiston standards for the buildings. Certainly, the new design meets that, but we wanted to make sure the board saw those changes to see that they are fairly minor in nature, just so you have that comfort level with what's being proposed. So that's what we're here for this evening. We do have a representative from the engineering firm if there are questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for staff or for the engineering firm? Because we'll bring them up if we need to, if we don't. No questions? Everybody's happy with calling this a de minimis change? I mean, I reviewed it, and I think they're all basically minor changes. Instead of going left, some of the stairs are going right, and some, instead of going down straight, they're going left, or the ramp is going right and then left. I think it's, yes, Ms. Cox.
I have a staff question, I think.
Absolutely.
I think, if it's not, you'll tell me. I have no problem with what's being offered today, and I think they fit well within de minimis, but I am wondering if there's any learning for us on the setback front for the stairs and what it relates to the intent of versus what we're learning as we roll out the Design Lewiston standards, particularly because I think the intent, as we discussed it at the time, which was a while ago and not all of us that are currently here, but the intent is in neighborhoods where the existing housing structures front the street and your porch stairs and stoop is right there on the sidewalk, to allow for new construction to mimic and keep within that. And it sounds like we're turning a whole bunch of stairways and pushing buildings back because that change has not been realized. Is that how I'm to infer all the spots that shows up?
So what's happened is fairly complicated behind the scenes. So, but it is a good question. I will say that it's less about our requirements that's causing these changes, and more a series of situations that the parcels have with this deed restriction. And then also the applicant, as they looked into the deed restriction with their attorney, determining what structures had to be out of that deed restriction. It was determined that the staircases had to be outside of the deed restriction where they thought that they didn't have to be. So there was a little bit of a determination of definitions and so forth on their side, and a level of comfort that they wanted to have and certainty that they were outside of it. So in the process, what they ended up doing, which they didn't originally do, was they looked at utilizing that uniform setback provision in our code to see if they could get some relief that way. There were a couple buildings for which that helped, so that they had to do less changes. Unfortunately, on this particular street, there are a couple of buildings that are set back quite far. So really, there wasn't a terrific uniform setback that was nice and tight to the road as one would have found. It's not, you don't always get lucky. So that didn't work out for them for all of their buildings. So that did require them to make some changes. So that's kind of my understanding of where we are. If the applicant would like to speak, certainly to that, we could ask him to, but there were a lot of discussions back and forth with staff and looking at definitions and figuring out what's a structure, is a staircase, the handicap ramp isn't because we can treat it like a walkway. So there were different determinations that were made behind the scenes. Okay. Yeah. But it is a good question because we are still, all of us, living with this and figuring out at what points we're bumping into problems with the ordinance and whether changes would be good going forward.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. What is the likeliness that the applicant will have to come before the planning board again as it relates to the Wedgewood sites?
They are very close to moving forward with financing and actually breaking ground, I believe. So the intent is that this covers the full suite of changes they're planning on making, and that all the issues have been addressed so they can move forward with actually the next phase, which is getting out of planning and implementation.
Okay, then I have a question for the applicant.
Okay, if you would come to the table and identify yourself, and then Ms. Cox will ask her question.
Does this one work?
Yeah.
Nate Holt with Acorn Engineering.
Thanks. I'll be curious if you can answer this question or if it's one that you'd prefer to refer it to Catherine, but the reason I asked about whether you were likely to come in front of the planning board or not is because I'd like you to answer the following question honestly, and it might be challenging to do that if you were relying on us to approve something else in the future, but this site provides multiple buildings, the integration of pedestrian pathways, parking that's in the rear, snow storage. It has been a good test run, and I would say there's almost no part of the design Lewiston standards that you haven't had to touch, whereas most of the projects that we review have very one element of the design Lewiston standards. We are a learning planning board and would like very much for the process to be smooth, the things to be clear, and for this to work to a cohesive, walkable core to the city of Lewiston. That's kind of been our goal with these standards and as we've evolved them, as you even heard today with the buffers. So I guess I'm just curious what your experience has been with the standards and if there is anything that you would offer as feedback. We already heard from a prior associate of yours attached to the project, I don't think they were with Acorn though, about the glazing requirements, which was actually really helpful and has informed the board's thinking. But is there anything that you would like to share with us about working with the design Lewiston standards? Because this is such a large, comprehensive, multi-building site that you've got a really unique perspective.
Yeah, I would, the setback requirements, so I guess just to kind of expand on what Shelley was saying, so we had a 12-foot deed front setback requirement on a portion of the site, so that kind of made us take another look at how we can comply with that deed setback, and then we asked staff how they define structure in their ordinance, what complies with a front setback, and we learned that the front stoops did count as a structure, so that kind of made us push everything into the site because the steps were considered a part of the structure. So I think, if the intent is really to have a walkable city with buildings close to sidewalks, having some sort of an exclusion, that defines the front of the building from the steps that would have given us a lot more flexibility. I would also add, we had another kind of complicated part with that setback definition. We have roof overhangs over those front steps, so even though the front steps, if those were excluded from setback, it would be good to exclude those overhangs as well. So it kind of, even though the steps are excluded, if the overhang still gets you, you can't. Right?
You can't do anything, right, okay.
Except get your groceries wet.
Right, but that's very helpful. I think that we should definitely, think about when we're redoing or reviewing the design standards, because we really should review the design standards because of the glazing issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be the second issue that we would look at, glazing and steps and overhangs. Okay, thank you so much. That's very helpful.
I appreciate it.
We're looking to make things as easy as possible for our developers and make it more walkable and make it work better. So anyone else have any questions? Amy?
Yeah, just one question on a
Sure.
similar topic. So, because it's set back a little bit, there's like a small walkway now, say from Bartlett Street to the bottom of the steps? And is that gonna be paved and joined into the existing sidewalk? I'm just looking at,
Right, the revised site
Which one?
plan. The revised site plan.
yeah, the revised.
Yeah, she's looking
Site plan, I'm just looking at these little.
That's the
bits.
original.
That's why.
Okay, so the revised, no, this one is the revised. So the revised, the original, that's the original. Here, I've got it.
Hang on, I'm getting there. It's the
Okay,
fourth
you
one
got it.
down.
Okay, so if you look, between here, see, it was really short, now it's gonna be longer, drive. So she's wondering, is it gonna be paved and et cetera?
And like tied into the sidewalk? as
Yeah.
It won't belong to the city, but will it be sort of visually?
Yeah.
You're talking about the driveway, just south of Building H?
No,
Okay.
we're talking about the sidewalks from the new steps to the city sidewalk. Okay? Right, that's what you're looking at this right there, okay.
Now that they're back.
They're back, the sidewalk is longer. Okay, before it looked like it was just a couple of feet, now it looks more like 4 feet.
I see. Yes, those will be paved, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll be paved
Yeah.
and maintained, and
Right,
shoveled
what's
and-
in private property will be
Right.
on the, yeah.
Okay,
on the
all
development.
right.
But will it tie in with the public sidewalk? Like, I'm just wondering if it's going to look good.
Well, I would imagine
Yes,
that
yeah,
they,
it'll tie into the public sidewalks, yep.
okay. Yeah, that's fine, Shelley, I think we, Alex?
Oh, there's
Okay.
some more down there.
Well, I saw you
Sure.
first, so.
Okay.
I'll get to everybody.
Maybe this is sort of a general question, but so now that we have additional setback between the building and the sidewalk, I think that changes the relationship of, I would assume there would be landscaping in between the two originally. Now there's like double the amount of landscaping or something. In some cases, like there's significantly more. Maybe this is a question for Shelley, like how do we treat sort of that line between public and private space here? Especially since these are multi-unit. I know that often gets a little blurry. Is there gonna be any planting that sort of turns this extra green space into more private space for the residents, which I don't think would actually be a bad thing? Or is it going, like, what are our standards here for that?
Yeah, we don't, well, that's a good question. Let me just, before I say something, let's just look and make sure. Because I was going to say, I'm not sure that we do have a standard there. I think it's more of a guideline than a standard.
Yeah, if it's grass, it can't be more than 12 inches tall, that's all, I think that's it.
But it's not a yard.
That's true, it's not a yard, is it? It's a setback.
It's a setback.
Let's just see.
Yeah, so do we require, shrubs or plantings or something? Because
It looks
when
like
winter
it's-
comes, whatever's there is gonna die because the snow is gonna be shoveled onto it, and just like my front lawn next to the road, it dies in the winter and just,
So it looks like we require that for commercial, so front yards and building setbacks. Commercial front yards, including areas between the principal wall plane of the building and the public street, should be landscaped for the entire length except for driveways, pedestrian access ways, and allowable encroaching building attachments. So there's no requirement, I don't think, for residential. And then there are requirements for landscaping parking lots, which this isn't that situation. So I don't think we have a requirement. We didn't really require anything previously in there. And so I think it's just a situation where some of the lawn area at the rear of the buildings is now diminished, and there's bigger lawns in front of the buildings, is essentially what's happened in a lot of the cases.
it's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I would encourage, when you have 4 feet of lawn, that's an entranceway. When you have 12 feet of lawn, that's more like a front yard. And so the way the spaces will behave for the residents and for the people walking on the street, I think will be different. So I'd encourage the applicant to think about maybe something other than grass, maybe something that, depending on the intention for that space, right? Like if you intend to have the residents using it, that's one thing. If you intend to be, for it to be sort of liminal space that the people are going to be passing through, again, sort of dividing that public and private space in that front yard area. I think now that there is more area, grass is maybe not the best solution.
Okay.
That's a great suggestion, and I know that the we're essentially bringing the subdivision part of this to you for de minimis change tonight. There are still changes to the rest of the drawing set that staff will be looking at and signing off on, and they do have a landscape architect, so we don't have the amended landscape plan. So we will share that comment with the applicant.
Okay, great. Michael?
What was the previous distance? I'm hearing 12 with this change.
So what happened was the applicant came in for a contract zone, and the requirement was pre-contract zone. So for the zone, the requirement is that your building be 5 feet to 10 feet from the road. So they did a contract zone, so it could be 5 feet to 15 feet from the road. And they thought that that 12 to 15 feet, that 3 feet was going to be enough space for them. But then later, when we started looking at what's a structure and what isn't, 3 feet wasn't a significant enough distance for them to work with face of building versus stoop and stairs. They just didn't have enough play in that 3 feet for the design. So that's why they've had to adjust things, is that private restriction for 12 feet and our requirement that the building not be set too far back, and their contract zone of 15. So that's kind of how we got into this pickle.
What this discussion reminds me of is just down the road at Pierce Place, and I think it was 5 feet, which seemed to be ample when I hear 5 feet, but when you drive by, it was not. And I've made comments about how close to the road that Pierce Place is to the sidewalk and the road. So I kind of like the idea of pushing it back a little bit further. I'm having a hard time visualizing 12 feet and how much space it's going to create, like a small yard. But at the same time, I'm curious as to deed restrictions. How do those get in there?
So that is a private restriction that was well before anyone, maybe any of us alive here. I mean, this is an old deed restriction on this particular property.
Why would that carry forward to new ownership?
It's in the deed, just like an easement or anything else. It continues forward unless people were to do the legal work to try to extinguish it. And the applicant determined that it was in their best interest to just work with it instead of trying to untie that knot. So, yeah, I mean, at the city level, we don't enforce a private deed restriction, but they obviously want to design it so they're in compliance with this restriction. So that's why we're here.
Would those deed restrictions have something to do with 100 years ago Franklin Properties or the construction of the streets, city streets?
Very possibly, because it is along one of the street faces, and I don't know, why it's on there and not on the other side of the street. I'm not sure what.
And I've heard some interesting stories about the intersection at is it Walnut Street?
Yeah.
Where Friends Deli used to be. That's a lot of fill down there. If you were to dig down, you'd see some interesting cavernous areas. I'll save that for another time.
Okay. Anyone else? Roger?
Just for clarification, the original setback was from the road to the building.
Property line.
Right, so now it's from the road to the porch.
Correct, yeah, property line to the porch, yeah. the
Right,
front
so
steps,
that,
yeah.
the setback includes the sidewalk.
Right.
The sidewalk is on the other side of the property line. I see, the private sidewalks.
Are you asking about the private sidewalks or the street
City
facing
sidewalk.
City with sidewalk.
The city sidewalk.
It's essentially from the edge of the city sidewalk
Oh,
to,
it's the edge of the sidewalk to the porch.
correct, yeah. Yeah.
street side edge of the sidewalk?
No, the inside, isn't it? The inside edge.
Private side of the
Yeah, the
sidewalk.
private side.
Essentially, the sidewalk lines up, because we're repaving them, it lines up right on the property line, so
Right.
it's.
Right.
The lawn side of
The lawn
the
side,
sidewalk.
the lawn
yeah.
side, not the street side. Right. Mr. Najin?
The only question I have is, I seem to remember that we had given a few variances concerning access for the parking, concerning like ambulance and fire department, things like that, because we made the spots smaller. Does this hamper the parking in any way, shape, or form?
No, this circulation through the site still remains the same. That was really a key component of this revised site design. So we didn't want to hinder that at all.
Right, okay. All right, anyone, Alex?
Sorry.
No, you're not.
Yeah. No, I'm not actually sorry. You're right. All right. Okay, so looking at it here, so basically it seems like the residents on the, let's see, 107 Bartlett and 115 Bartlett, they have no green space in the back anymore. So it just goes straight to the circulating sidewalk inside
Right,
there.
because the green space
Yeah,
is
yeah,
now
yeah.
in the front,
No, I understand that.
because they had to push them back.
Yeah, no, I get why. I get why.
Other than the green space labeled by T?
Yeah,
see, he's
so
talking about
they
this. See,
still have this
this.
big common lawn,
And no,
but,
they don't.
you know, in terms of walking out your back door, or
Mm-hmm.
I guess that would be the front door for some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions, comments? And in that case, I would entertain a finding. Because it's not a motion.
Weird, okay.
I know.
I'll make a finding that the amendment to Wedgewood Subdivision 101 Pine Street is a de minimis change as per Article 13, Section 3K of the Zoning and Land Use Code. Sorry, is 101 Pine Street the address for the whole, because there's de minimis changes across? Did I capture them all just by simply saying 101 Pine Street?
That is the address that's been given for the
For
project.
the whole thing, okay.
Um,
Because it's not like 101 Pine Street LP and we're approving all de minimis changes throughout. I just want to make sure I'm not like approving one building's worth of, just simply by saying not enough words.
Isn't 101 Pine the old funeral home? Isn't that the existing building?
Yeah,
I'm just curious how captions are referring to.
I just
Because I think that's.
don't want us to
they've
be
been
dealing with a
using-
technicality in a couple weeks, right?
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, there's some on
Hold on,
Bartlett and on
Pierce.
Pierce, and- right?
Yeah, but I think
I would
they're
go by the
using
building- the building
old,
layout.
funeral home building as it's that one, right there.
Yeah. That's my concern, is that there's de minimis changes on Building F, which has 115 Bartlett Street, and Building G, which is 42
Should we
Walnut.
rephrase it to say?
Just
Not
Wedgewood?
one, yeah, just one Wedgewood subdivision and not name 101 Pine?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Or we could name the specific buildings as well, right?
Well, I don't
I
think
can
we
name
need-
all the addresses that are listed on the sheet. I just,
Right, but I think if we just do Wedgewood
Wedgewood
subdivision and
subdivision.
leave it at that, I
Yeah.
think it's better than
I mean,
doing
that
101.
Wedgewood
Everything.
subdivision is what you've used in your subject line. Can that be all encompassing?
Okay,
Nate also has a list of addresses.
yeah, I don't think we need.
Whichever's gonna
I
make
don't think
everybody
we-
feel good
If you
today.
just say.
Yeah, can I do that?
Yeah, I think if we just
Okay.
remove the physical
No
address.
one seconded me yet, right?
No.
Okay. Can I take another stab, Ms.
Yes.
Tripp, at our, is that all right? Thank you, yeah. Yeah, just, cross the Ts, dot I's, folks. I'd like to make a finding that the amendment to the Wedgewood subdivision is a de minimis change as per Article 13, Section 3K of the Zoning and Land Use Code.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Christie. Any further discussion? Roger Dupree,
Yes,
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte.
Yes.
Shanna Cox.
Yes.
Christine Kittredge.
Yes.
Amy Smith.
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes, all right. And we'll try to fix the porch issue, the step issue in the future. I
It's
think
helpful.
so.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
feedback.
Thank you. All right. So we don't have reading of the minutes, and I think we need to set up, Shelley, on our calendar, looking at the design Lewiston standards, and specifically glazing and
Structures.
the structures, the definition of a porch and, the steps and the roof, the overhang over it.
And do we feel good about the blank wall? Is that tied up with a bow?
I think we did that. We tied that one up.
Yeah, okay.
I think so.
Yeah, right?
So I think if we looked at those two, I think, because they've been coming up, the glazing especially has been coming up.
Yeah.
And I think the 25%, or whatever the heck we decided, it's really too much. So I think we really need to revisit that. And with the issue that they had, I think, yeah, steps shouldn't be part of the structure.
And that may be a building code issue and not something that we can change, but staff will look at that. We've.
Right,
in-
and
in
if we
this
can't,
discussion-
let us know, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and it's also not just in the design Lewiston standards, like that's actually more of an issue in other parts of the
Right.
code. So, yeah, we can look into that and report back from discussion with code enforcement on that.
Okay, all right. Shanna?
If I can add to that, I don't know what we don't know. So if there are other things that you are seeing come up in conversations with developers, particularly to, this could be clearer, or this leaves a lot of, whatever those items may be, like, bring those forward as well. I mean, just a thoughtful, comprehensive, this is the intent behind what we're doing, how are we doing it, reaching that intent would be helpful.
Yeah. Josh?
I just had a quick question about the blank walls. Did we decide that murals and artworks broke up a wall?
I don't think so.
We didn't.
I don't think so. We specified the 15 feet this way and that way. We were clearer, because before it was just a blank wall. And I think we got to some defined what a blank wall was and more dimensions of it, so that it's clearer to the developer and to us.
And that when the paint wears off, there's something structural there that breaks up the wall, regardless of
Right, right.
monochrome mural. Look, it's blue.
Okay, anybody else have
I
anything?
feel though like there was something about murals that the board agreed on.
Well, we talked about murals.
Didn't we define murals?
I think we defined
Those
murals.
did get defined, but I thought the decision might have been made that a mural also counted towards breaking up a blank wall. And
Well, maybe you can make a note and.
Feel free to bring
and-
it forward.
Yeah, add that to.
I'll look for it because
Right.
I know we did talk about this and I'll see where we landed.
Okay, all right.
But the
And
material-
any further discussions,
Painting up,
pro-
like, look, I solved the
proposals, or in that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Nobody wants to leave?
I do all kinds of motions. Somebody else's turn.
Okay, do I have a second?
I would second.
Okay, all those in favor? All right,
Thank you.
all right, good night, everyone.
Thanks for accepting me being sick last time.
Hey, it's one of those
I was
things,
sick for a week and I went to work being like, I'm gonna be fine. And then
and then you
oh my God, by like 3 o'clock, I'm like,
All right.
can't do this, I can't,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna be coherent. Won't make any sense. Y'all are gonna wanna throw me out.
No, probably right.
I got it. Exactly the case.
Right. No, I'd rather you.
80 on Friday, guys. 80 on Friday.
I know.